And kind of go back to literary, I think on one of your shows on your Ghosts of Bacon YouTube site, you mentioned that perhaps Sir Walter Raleigh wrote Don Quixote.
Yes, yeah. And I think that I were talking about this earlier. I liked your idea about that as well, because um, so much about it is so very much Raleigh, but there's also that element of Bacon in there too. So either it's a collaboration or it was done by Sir Walter Raleigh, in my opinion.
And how did you find out that piece of information that at least Raleigh may have been? What piece did
Well,
mine
what I
did you?
did, I looked at the frontispiece, the original frontispiece of it, and looked for cipher evidence and numbers that are specifically attributed to Walter Raleigh. For example, the number 51 comes to mind. That's the value of the name Walter Raleigh in Elizabethan short cipher. That's one of his signature numbers. And so that number kind of came out at me in that frontispiece. And so basically, I was looking at it in terms of his war on the Spanish, right? He was heavily involved in fighting the Spanish Armada. He was privateering, and attacking the Spanish is what eventually got him in trouble with King James. Um, and so that only makes sense that he would be, casting aspersions and making fun of some of the sentimentality and the values of the Spanish in particular.
Okay.
So that was my original thought.
Okay. And Orthodox history says Raleigh was imprisoned, was it 1603 or to 16 something? Is that true? Was he in the
He was out privateering and later pirating under an alias. And unfortunately, I'm under NDA. I can't really discuss that alias specifically on your show, but there's a very clear message. It actually was in my very first book, The Holy Trinity Decryption, where basically there's a biliteral cipher in the plaque, and it states that explain our sea keys with Walter Raleigh is the message. It says, James let him out of a cage. So the whole time that he was supposed to be languishing in the Tower of London, he was actually out under a different name that cannot be attached to James, as one of that's one of James's knights on Sir Walter Raleigh. Couldn't attach it to him. It was somebody completely different. Okay. And so he just let him go.
Okay. And then regarding Francis Bacon, according to you and other Baconians, he faked his death. He did not die in 1626.
Right.
So what did he do? If he did not die in 1626, what did he do? Where did he go?
Well, I love this question because there are a variety of places he went. Obviously, he came here to the colonies, spent some time here, but he was also he was a Danish artist, a rather prominent one. He spent time in Hesse Castle, Germany. That was one of their bases of operation. That's where the Rosy Cross manifestos were first appeared, and so they had a base of operations there. He was being an astronomer with again in Denmark with Tycho Brahe. Tycho Brahe, I believe, was another alias of Raleigh, and so he was the one with. I believe he was the one that had the fake brass nose, right?
Oh.
So it would be a great disguise, right? His cousin cut off his nose in a duel one time was the story, but also you just put on a brass nose and you're a different person. Mm-hmm. Pretty interesting, but he. I'll give this little bombshell. He was known by the name of Peter Paul Rubens, the great Renaissance artist.
Okay.
Peter Paul. Yeah, he was the artist in residence for Charles I, James's son. He painted the ceiling of the banquet house that Charles had built. in an extremely just ornate series of paintings portraying the apotheosis of James the First, Charles's father. So it venerates James the First, Bacon's younger half brother. Yeah, and Bacon states in his ciphertext that he had just a great deal of love for James as his brother. He loved seeing him on the throne instead of himself, which most people, it seems very counterintuitive, but there was a lot of affection between those two men for sure. And so I think he would have enjoyed that project.
Well, and to your earlier point, if Francis was after really educating the world, he probably couldn't have done it as well if he was a monarch or sovereign. He would have had other things
Exactly.
drawing his time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. He saw it as his life's work to raise people up out of the well of ignorance and bring them to the light of truth. That was his whole goal.
Which was constantly referenced in Shakespeare plays, right? Light. I need light, the light. So another message.
Another message.
Yeah. And do we know what happened to Sir Walter Raleigh?
I think I do. He was publicly executed, and it was referred to as his last great performance because he got up there on the scaffold and treated it like a stage and gave, a riveting speech and was making jokes and, looks at the axe and he says, "Ooh, this is sharp medicine," the famous joke he made. And people all who were there commented on how he didn't even seem like he was about to die. He was totally unafraid. And in the ciphertext that I now have corroboration for in my next book, I demonstrate how they actually faked his beheading. Bacon says, it were art for Don Gondomar. Now, that name, of course, was the ambassador to Spain. He was the one that went into James, demanded Raleigh's head. And so James didn't have a choice. He had to give him his execution he wanted. And so in addition to that, for those who don't know, Raleigh's son Wat and his best friend attacked a Spanish outpost after Raleigh promised James that they would not attack the Spanish. They had signed a peace treaty. There was supposed to be no more privateering and attacking the Spanish. Well, his son Wat, his best friend, see this little outpost and they attack it. And the story goes that Wat was killed in the skirmish and that his best friend, after Raleigh refused to forgive him, he killed himself. And then Raleigh comes back to face the music with King James. In reality, they used this as an opportunity to fake both men's death. Wat Raleigh did live. He assumed another name, got placed on another one of Raleigh's ships as somebody else, and they came home. He was not going to let, his best friend and his son that he just doted on basically die for treason. They committed treason when they did that attack. So he went and, offered himself up. And what Bacon was able to do, he states that he used a sick slave, were the terms he used. It would have been someone who was terminally ill and probably, had no means. But I imagine they would have offered to take care of this person's family, and pay them handsomely. And so in that sense, this man would probably be willing to sacrifice himself, knowing that he was already dying, that be able to do something positive for his family. And so you have to remember these guys were masters of stagecraft, right? And Tycho Brahe was known for his machinations on stage, on the Globe Theater in particular, in special effects. So here you have a couple of guys who are really good at. I mean, think of modern illusionists being able to make a car disappear. All you need is a little bit of a misdirection, and so on. Poof, there they go. Well, what they did was, um, if you recall the story, at one point Raleigh invites a whole group of noblemen and ladies down from a balcony where they were there to watch. He invites them down to say goodbye, and he's going around shaking hands and giving hugs. And so this crowd of people is now on the scaffold with him. And well, you also have a mandated religion in this country. So before he's going to be executed, what do they all do? They all close their eyes and bow their heads for a prayer. Um, Bacon states that they used a dress and a veil. They put Raleigh in a dress and put a veil over his face. And then all of a sudden out walks this other guy that was dressed like him, had long hair covering his face, about the same height. And he only had to have one line he had to say, my ague is upon me, because all of a sudden here he is, a sick man, and he's sitting there trembling.
Mhm.
And Raleigh had stated, my sickness will be upon me within the next 20 minutes in his speech. And then right on cue, everyone lifts their heads, and here's this guy walking up to get his head chopped off. I mean, you can't believe it.
Wow.
It sounds like complete crazy nonsense, but when you stop to think about it, it all makes sense 100%.
Mhm. And in our previous conversations, that has resonance with Measure for Measure,
Yes,
where
yes,
they, where they
absolutely.
where they substitute someone to be executed, and the Duke in that play is also very theatric, very stage.
Yes,
So I'm wondering if
it's
yeah,
all right there.
it's all right there. So I'm wondering if that could be a mine for Raleigh's death. Um,
Absolutely. So, like I said, I have letter by letter decryptions in my book explaining the scientific decryption methods that produce these crazy, crazy statements that run so counter to what we think we know about history. And as a result, it's kind of it really makes me question, most of what we've read and what we've been taught in terms of history. It's recorded history, right? And who records it? The victors.
mhm.
And in this case, we have, as the victors here, um, well, Catherine de Medici, Queen Elizabeth I, and we also have James I later, and they're going to record it the way it needs to be recorded.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Did the love Francis have for James the First, was that reciprocated, or
Oh, 100%. He I think he worshipped him, honestly. Uh, and in particular, the titles that he bestowed upon him, Baron Verrill. Um, when you those are some of the cipher values that modern Baconians point to, um, as being significant numbers. And the funny thing is that those numbers are exactly the same as what his titles would be as Francois III and stuff like that. And so this is why he was so proud of being the Baron Verulam, is the cipher values actually equal his true identity.
wow?
It's really, really pretty neat. So yeah, and James knew this. He knew how to do all this stuff too, um, and he basically encouraged it. You know, so
Wow.
yeah, there was definitely a true affection going back and forth between these two men. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. And so I know I'm jumping around a little bit. So what have you found out what year Bacon died? What year he really died?
I haven't. I can place him at the execution of Charles I. He would have been 88 years old,
Was this in the
and
1660s or
no, it would have been
40s?
1628.
Oh,
Oh,
1628.
16 late 1630s, I think, if I remember correctly. But
Okay.
yeah, he would have been 88 years old. So
Oh yeah.
uh,
1660s he would have been over 100. Probably not
yeah,
possible at
yeah,
that time. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So well, I mean, a lot of people want to believe that he became Saint Germain, but I don't have any evidence to support that.
That was going to
But
be my next question, actually.
yeah, a lot of people ask me that. I don't have anything to support it, but I think that these that there may have been a younger person who resembled him greatly, that you know could fit that bill. But at any rate, uh, you know, you look at him at 88. There's a very famous woodcut engraving of the execution of Charles I, and it's full of cipher messages. Uh, there are 3 or 4 different versions of the same image, and in this one it's reversed, it's flipped. And on the roof, the execution actually happened in front of the banquet house, Charles I banquet house, and on the rooftop it's lined with spectators, but they're all in these weird positions. Some of them are on the peak of the roof, some of them are along the edge of the roof, and then there's a whole row of people standing at the bottom on the balustrade, and there's 55 of them. Now, 55 is the value of the name Francis Bacon in Elizabethan short cipher. It was one of his cipher signatures. And it's also divisible by 5, which means it could contain a biliteral cipher. And it does. And you can actually, there are 6 different starting points of the biliteral cipher, and I decrypted it going around the roof. And so the message basically states that, he saw several executions and he lists what they were. And it also, has his name encrypted within it. And there's an image in the foreground. One of the only people not looking at the spectacle on the stage of the decapitation, an elderly gentleman wearing a hat with his head bowed and holding his mouth as though he's sobbing with a walking stick, and he's turned away. That's Bacon.
And is that in the foreground of the image?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And again, it's the only. There's one lady who fainted, and that image is supposed to hearken us to the person who fainted when Christ was taken off the cross, and then of course you have Bacon here in the foreground. Is the only other person who's not looking. He couldn't bear to watch it.
Okay, so you mentioned, and I'm guessing you can't mention the young person who took on his likeness possibly and moved his.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay.
But he was living as a prominent doctor in Hesse-Kassel, Germany. That individual was, and who's to say? I mean, they had a strong resemblance, and his offspring probably would have had the same genetics and same. So if they pass on this tradition of this alias, which is what I think they did, I think they would pass on the aliases. There's one in particular that, for example, switching gears, Walter Raleigh passed on one of his aliases to his son Watt, who didn't die in that skirmish with the Spanish. So it makes sense that they would just kind of pass one on as a tradition.
Okay.
Maybe Saint Germain was one of them. I don't know, but I don't have evidence to support it at this point.
Okay. All right. And then again, you mentioned, so you have written 2 books right now?
Yes.
Okay.
The first one was called The Holy Trinity Decryption. I have one here. The hidden autobiography of Sir Francis Bacon. And here you can see the plaque. If I can get it focused. That's the plaque that I decrypted. And my other book is called The Oak Island Treasure Maps, because I started studying this plaque because of the Curse of Oak Island TV show. Researchers, my friends Chris Dona and Chris Morford, were studying the plaque. COVID hit, and I said, well, I know this thing has a transposition cipher. I'm going to try to crack it. I had extra time on my hands, so that's what I did, and it worked.
Wow.
And so I got so heavily involved in the Baconian part of the research, I forgot the Curse of Oak Island. But lo and behold, there are messages in that that actually allude to Oak Island, Nova Scotia. And so it sucked me back in. And so I kind of, I did a couple of war room presentations for them. And then I turned my attention back to my research. And I said, guys, I don't have time. If we can't find, what I called the knee of Hercules, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. And so, I said, I'm working on my next book, and, I need to get this done. So I go back and I continue the research, and lo and behold, I find even more information about Oak Island. One of them was in the Jerusalem map of the 1611 Bible. It has coordinates encrypted within it that actually lead to the exact spot where they're drilling right now, called the Garden Shaft. It puts that X right on that exact spot. And so that was really exciting. So I had to go back, okay, yeah, here's some more information, but I'm done with Oak Island. And then I go and I start doing my research. And then all of a sudden I find another map that leads directly to it again. And I'm like, oh, it just never ends. And so, my latest installation has to do with, I found a series of celestial alignments that go along with Bacon as the Dauphin. It involves another constellation, and so on the date of this plaque, if you take the computer program called Stellarium and you position your location on the stem of Nolan's Cross on Oak Island, for those of you who know the show, you know what that means. If you position yourself there and you type in the date of the plaque at midnight and look at the eastern horizon, you have the constellation of Delphinus just above the horizon, just north of due east. Now, the date is springtime, and I'm thinking, I wonder where the sun rises. And so I fast forwarded it, and the sun rises in that exact same location as Delphinus. Now, the sun is associated with Apollo, the god Apollo, and Bacon was always associated with the god Apollo. And so here you have the conjunction of Delphinus. Bacon was the Dauphin or Dolphin of France, and the correlation of the sun rising that exact same spot. And that's just half of the, or one of the three constellation alignments that go along with that date from that location. And it all comes from the plaque.
Okay. And for those who don't
Amazing.
know, can you describe the connection between Oak Island and Sir Francis Bacon?
Yeah, they were using it as a base of operations. My latest decryption, and again, I haven't shared this with anything. I'm probably not even going to publish it. I don't know. I'll have to eventually, but states that they happened upon the Templars' stone cross, Nolan's cross. So by accident, they just happened upon it. And so then it says this is a great base for our group, Rosy Cross, a safe base of operations. And so they just adopted it because it was already there. And this indicated to me that there's not this tradition that people have always assumed that of the Knights Templar passing on their knowledge to the Rosicrucians, and that there's this direct link. I think the only link is the island itself, where Bacon happened upon this thing, and he looks at it and he says, "Oh, I think I know who did this," and he recognized that it was work of the Knights Templar.
And so, I don't think I'm giving away any secrets, but some Baconians believe his body might be buried under the pond there, and that the Shakespeare manuscripts may be buried under there.
That's one of the theories. The original message I decrypted stated that his first folio and His Royal Highness's or Her Royal Majesty's royal birth records were there in a vault on Oak Island with Bacon himself. So that's what the message stated. Whether it's still exists or has been destroyed, or I don't know. So I've basically, every time I end up revisiting this, I try to give them a new location and say, well, could be here.
Okay.
So it's possible. Yeah, I just I tend to give my information directly to the team there. I don't go through the TV show, um, and yeah, I just prefer it that way.
Have you ever been on the TV show?
No, I've done two war room presentations with it being recorded for the show, but I guess cipher decryptions are a little more complicated than what Prometheus wants to try to explain to its audience,
Okay.
and so.
Prometheus being the production company.
The production company, yeah, yeah. So, and I get it. It's not something where you can just say, "Oh, look, here's this symbol, and it means this, and that we should dig here."
Hmm.
It's not that simple. It's a pretty complicated operation. So,
Okay.
but in that time, I made some great connections, and great friendships. The people that you see on TV, in real life are exactly the way they come across on that show. You have Marty, who's very just straightforward, straight shooter, really great guy. Rick is probably the most sage, wise guy, wise man that I've ever met, and just very kind and very generous. So just very good people. It was a really great experience, and like I said, I still maintain my connections with them in case like that last alignment I just mentioned. When I come across something like that, I'm like, hey, I just want to give you a heads up.
And and correct me if I'm wrong. Is Rick more of the? It seems like he does truly believe in the Baconian connection. He seems to believe that.
Yeah, and he's always been a fan of that. But right now, the narrative of the show is obviously tracking towards the Templars, right? Which I get it. Dr. Gaspani's report, his presentation, um, is definitive in terms of Nolan's Cross and who was responsible for it, in my opinion. Um, and so, because of that, obviously you want to follow through and see what you know what you can turn up in terms of um, uh, you know evidence to support that, and connections to the island and what they may have or may not have put there. On the other hand, you also have the fact that the majority of the artifacts they found um, are from the same time period as my guys, Bacon, Raleigh, and Drake, and they tend to be either English or French, which both make sense because of who Bacon was.
Mhm.
And this latest decryption, I mean, it just kind of threw a wrench right in the works for me, because now you have this is the first time I've seen any reference. People have been asking me right along if I've in my decryptions I've found any evidence of connections between the Templars and the Rosicrucians, and I just hadn't. This is the first time the word Templars appeared in anything I found.
Okay.
And again, he says, I happen upon Templars Petra Cross. Petra, of course, Latin for boulder. So that fits the bill for Nolan's Cross as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
So it's pretty interesting stuff.
Yes. Yes. And endless. Doesn't it seem endless?
It is endless. And it's funny, I was talking with John Edwards about this the other day, because he and William have been working on a book now for the last 2 years, and they're running into the same thing I ran into. And finally, I just had to put a cap on it, because I would get ready to publish, and I'd be going through and doing some editing and revision in my book, and I would make a new discovery, and I said, I have to include this. So I'd go back and revise and include it, and I'd be going through the process again and make another discovery, and I got to put this in. So it never ends. And finally, I just said, okay, regardless of what I find, I just need to put a count, because I'm right now, this next book is probably the same or a little bit longer than my last book, which was 350 pages. And so I just need to, but they're running into the same thing. They've been ready to publish probably 3 or 4 times, and they keep making more discoveries, and then they feel like they have to rewrite it and put it in, and it just doesn't end. It's
Yeah.
never ending.
Yeah. Do you have a title for your third book?
Yes, it's The Keys of the Rosy Cross.
The Keys of the Road. Okay.
That's the main title.
Okay. And do you have a date of publication in mind?
Well, let's see. I've had 3 so far.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely coming out this spring. Like I said, I'm the only thing I really have left. I'm working on the final chapter now, and then I have to organize the appendices, and as soon as I do that, it's done.
Okay.
So we're looking at probably trying to get it out there by the end of May.
Okay. And all your books can be purchased on Amazon, or will
Amazon, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, they're available on Amazon, or if you go to my website, The Ghost of Bacon, you can just click the link, it'll take you right there.
Okay. So you do have a website, Ghosts of Bacon, and you have a YouTube channel, Ghosts of Bacon.
Yes, and we have a Facebook group also called The Ghost of Bacon. The name comes from the publication of verses that Dr. William Raleigh printed after Bacon's philosophical death. It was called Manus Verulomiani, if you want a tongue twister there. Manus means shades or ghosts, and Verulum was Bacon's title. So I just modernized it into and simplified it as The Ghosts of Bacon.
Can you talk a little bit about William Raleigh, who he was in connection to? Or...
William Raleigh was Bacon's personal secretary and also his personal minister. And I suspect probably it wasn't his real name. I suspect it was one of his younger relatives. And so, he was basically his personal assistant, the keeper of all of his letters and writings. And so when Bacon died, his philosophical death, he left all of his books, all of his writings to the Dr. William Raleigh. And he saw fit to publish a few of these things after Bacon's philosophical death.
And didn't he say that people will be astonished at the amount of things that Francis Bacon wrote?
Yeah. He said that in Manus Verulomiani, he makes a statement of that he kept some of the choicest ones back that he wasn't going to publish, but he basically implies that there was a ton of poetry and books that he had written but hadn't published under his own name.
Okay.
Yeah, and the idea is that that people would be shocked when they find out exactly how prolific and how productive Francis Bacon truly was, and I agree.
Thank you, Jake, very much. So,
Joe, thanks for having me. I mean, like I said, I've been ever since you asked me to do this, I've been looking forward to it, and it was every bit as fun as I knew it would be. And maybe next time we'll actually get into some of the names and their works that you wanted to get into.
Yes,
we have to do this again.
Yes, definitely. I enjoyed it very much as well. And again, go to Amazon to check out his books. You can just type in Jake Roberts, and the book should pop up.
Yep.
Okay, and then Ghost of Bacon on YouTube and Ghost of Bacon website.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thanks again, Jake.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. This is a lot of fun.